At least I think it's fun. We have a new addition to our family. Ryan and Taylor Sonez had a baby, if you guys didn't know. So June 4th, they had Parker. Is it up there? Someday it'll be up there. So they had Parker on June 4th. We are excited for them. We're a little late, but we're within the month, so we're still good. We're still safe. But I would ask that you would just show some extra love to this family. It's a transition for them, going from 1 in Pearl to 2 in Pearl and Parker. So show them some extra love, show them some extra compassion. Yes. His beard and his mane make me jealous, so we'll just roll with it. He's a better looking man than I, that's for sure. And then one more thing going on this week that I want to make sure you guys are aware of is our little Patriots Day parade. I know we've talked about this for a while, but we need you, church, to show up, okay? We need you to show up to stand around the parade route, which is our parking lot, kind of the road that goes around the building. We need you to bring candy with you to give to our kiddos as they're going to ride their bikes and have some fun. Let's make this a big day for our kids, for the kids in our community. But like I said, to make that happen, to make it fun for our kids, we need you guys to show up in masses. Bring your friends, bring a neighbor. This is not a church thing. This is a fun thing, okay? So show up. Let's have some fun. This Saturday, get here by 9-ish. I think we're starting about 9:30 on the parade. You'll see my times are just flawless this morning. So show up, let's have some fun. You'll probably be done, honestly, in 45 minutes and can go home. So it's not a big chunk of your day, but we want to make the kids of this community feel loved, feel cared for, and all that. Can we do that? Yes. All right. If only you applauded like that at the end of my messages. All right, so we are continuing our series in Jehovah. And last week we talked about Jehovah Rohi, the Lord is our shepherd. So Jehovah, to recap some fun stats for you, Jehovah is used in the Bible 6,823 times. It means permanent existence, always has been, always will be, no beginning, no end. So Jehovah Rohi is what we talked about last week, is God has always been and will always be my shepherd. To me, that's kind of cool because we think finite. Everything to me in my world is finite. So to think of God always having been and always will be, it's just fun for me. But as we look at Hebrews compared to English, like I said last week, is a very descriptive language. Where when we read in the Bible, God and Lord, in Hebrew, there's a lot of different things going on behind that. They have 80 different names for God. And so Jehovah Rohi, the Lord is my shepherd, conveys a very personal God and yet a very big, all-knowing, all-powerful, almighty, awesome God. Today was a fun one. This one to me resonates a lot, and you'll hear through my stories this morning that it's just fun. And yes, your pastor cries, and that's just the way it is. So if you didn't know that in the beginning, just get used to it. It happens. But today is Jehovah Jireh, our provider. And if this one doesn't get you excited, then I hope one day we can talk in the future and this one gets you excited. So when I look at my own life, I can see just the hand of provision, just running in and through it. So growing up, I wouldn't say we had a lot as a kid, but we always had more than enough. We always had more than what we needed. I saw my parents walk and live by faith that God would provide, that God would show up, that he would do awesome things. And I saw them make decisions that would impact our family, but they were godly decisions. But I also watched my dad work his tail off. I watched my dad get up at 2 and 3 a.m. every morning, 7 days a week, still does. And I don't know how he does it because I can barely get up when my alarm clock goes off. But he does this every day. He gets up at 2 and 3 a.m., 7 days a week to deliver newspapers. And then he would go to his real job, which for the longest time was banking and finance. He was in treasury management for a while. Like, he did big jobs and still got up early to deliver papers so that we could have the things we needed. And then sometimes during holiday seasons, he would even go to a third job because the man is crazy. So the guy just works really hard. So I saw what hard work does and what it provides and what it is growing up. And as I graduated college, I knew I was supposed to be in ministry. I knew it. I've kind of walked you guys through my story different times. But I knew ministry was the route for me, and so I started at a church that, I mean, they could barely afford me on their payroll. It was like, it was God had to call me there. But God did. And so I knew I was supposed to be there. Like I said, I didn't pay a lot. I worked 2 and 3 jobs on many occasions to be at that church, to be in ministry. At one point in time, I'm the youth pastor and I'm the custodian. Okay? So we had a charter school that rented from us because we had amazing facilities that God had blessed us with. And so I would clean for the charter school every day. Toilets and classrooms and kids are messy. And then I would be a youth pastor and we would do all those things. And I had very few wants, but my needs barely got met. So I had plenty of wants, but really I didn't have any wants because I had to take care of the needs first. But I saw God provide in amazing ways. He provided jobs, although not great jobs. I mean, cleaning toilets is not my funnest thing I can think of. And working night shift at some places was not the most ideal, but God provided jobs. Not only did he provide jobs, but he provided jobs that allowed me to focus on ministry. He allowed jobs that were flexible in their time. I could clean bathrooms at 1 a.m. because there's no one there. And as long as they were clean before school started, the school was happy, the church was happy, and I was asleep. But God provided. God provided these jobs. He provided a way for me to make ends meet. But here's the thing. There was times where it didn't always add up. The dollar wasn't covered. The bills didn't get paid. Well, almost didn't get paid. I can remember times that I couldn't afford groceries. Like I would open the cabinets and go, all right, 4 packs of ramen. That should get me a couple of days. Okay, what else do I got? And I'm packaging and piecing things together and thinking, all right, God, this is going to be fun. But what I noticed is randomly, whenever those times in my life came, people in the church would call, my friends would call, my parents or others would just show up with a bag of groceries. They had no idea. But God was providing in small, tangible ways that met my needs so that I wouldn't starve. Now, I really haven't missed a meal, but I wouldn't starve. But I can remember one story that resonates with me and will always stay with me. And it was 1 month where I was short on rent. I was short. I mean, when I say short on rent, I don't mean like $20 short. Like I was short on rent. And I was preparing to walk into the rental office. Like I'm walking from my apartment to the rental office. I had worked the morning getting things ready for the youth and all that. I'm walking to the office and I was going to go try to work a deal, turn my charm on, play let's make a deal with the lady in the office to see what kind of maybe a payment plan we could work out or figure out. And I felt the Holy Spirit just prompt me of, go back to church. Go check the mailbox. So, all right. it was odd to me because I'd already been there. Okay, I was already at church. I already checked the mail for the day. And I walk in and there's an unmarked envelope sitting in my mailbox with cash for rent. Every dollar was provided for rent. And I was able to walk it from church down the hill and turn that in for rent. And here's the kicker. Here's the part that still gets me to this day. So this is during the week, charter school in the building. Building's locked down. Like we had badges we carried around that were scan in, scan out type badges. We had to have a record of who was in the building at any point in time. The office was scan in, scan out. Between the time I left, checking my mail, and the time I got back, checking my mail, no one had scanned in or scanned out. So to this day, I still can't figure out where that money showed up and how it got there, but it did. And like it's huge, and it's just an amazing confirmation for me at that time, and still I can look back and rely on that. And to be honest, I'm a pretty proud guy, okay? It's a problem I have. I've recognized it. I've gone through Problems Anonymous, okay? So I know that I've got a problem, and I'm a proud guy, and that's just what it is. But being a proud, reserved person, I don't talk about finances. I never have. Like my wife and I talk about finances, but I've never talked about finances to be like, church, I'm a couple dollars short this month. It's never something where I had talked about it with staff. I had never talked about it with people. So there was nobody in all these different times I was at this church that ever knew that I was struggling for any reason. But God knew, and God provided, and God always helps figure it out. So I had this mindset of working hard, but for the longest time, it took a while for me to get to trust God, then work hard. Not just work hard, and then God will show up, but trust God and then work hard. So now I know I work hard to listen and follow where God is calling me, and I let God bring the options to take care of the needs, bring the jobs to pay the bills, the blessings and the gaps, and on and on and on. But what about you? Think about it this morning. Do you trust God to provide for you? We often struggle to live a lifestyle of trust when tests come our way. Most probably understand clearly the work hard part. I think we are a church and we are a people. I know you guys well enough so far. I know you guys work hard. So we get that part, but do we understand the trust component of it? We lack a lot of times that step out in faith, that real trust. It's hard to trust God with the big when we're not willing to walk in the faithful of the small things. When we are following God and don't trust or not really following God with the small things or the basic needs, then how can we trust Him when it comes to the rent or the mortgage or a relocation or the bigger things that come in life if we haven't been responsible or faithful with the small things? And you have to start somewhere. It helps to have people around you that will help you see the small things. But here's one thing I believe. I know that Scripture has a great promise. I know it. I've seen it. I've read it. We're going to look at it today. Scripture has a great promise that God is our provider. In Philippians 4:19, it says, "And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of His glory in Jesus Christ." So here we can already see two things. One, God will meet all our needs. But two, according to His glory in Jesus Christ. But we can see that it says our needs, not our greeds. Think about that for a second. The Bible doesn't say, "I will meet your greed." The Bible says, "I will meet your need." So here Paul uses "my God" to imply that God would reward their bounty to the servants by fully supplying their every need, even as they had fully supplied His need. And God will not only out of His, but because of His glorious riches, He will supply for us. In today's lingo, I like to think Paul would have said something like this, like, "You met my need because they had given to Him. So you met my need, and God is going to meet your need. You met one need that I have, but my God," Paul, "will meet all of your needs. You gave out of your poverty," because these guys didn't have a lot. So they gave out of their poverty, but God will supply your needs out of His riches and glory. One thing I was reading put it this way, and this one really set with me. So listen very closely with this. When the child of God is in the will of God, serving for the glory of God, he will have every need met. So think about the layers there. When the child of God is in the will of God, serving the glory of God, then he will have every need met. This is something I think we tend to lack in today's culture. We don't bother to ask or pray about our needs until we've tried them ourselves, until we try to figure out every option, until we try to work another job, until we try to do another thing or ask another person. God is like our de facto prize. Like, oh, that didn't work. God, I need you. I need you to show up. Please show up, do something. It's the reverse of how we need to live. Let's start by being children of God. And if we think about children, there's a dependence in children, right? I know my kids might make it a little while without me, but eventually they're going to need more food in the house. Eventually they're going to need more love and more care from someone. Someone is going to have to take care of, have to provide for. So we need to start with dependence, then move into serving for the glory of God, not for ourselves, not to make ourselves awesome or make ourselves cool or make Livingston Christian Center shine in the community. No, serve for the glory of God. Then and only then will we have every need met. So I referenced earlier about the cool things that I've always seen God bless me with, but here's the thing. I used to struggle big time with something as simple as the tithe. I did. It was a real struggle. I mean, pride, tithe, maybe they go hand in hand. I don't know. We'll break that down at some point in time. So I used to have this mindset that, God, I can't afford to tithe. And we're not going to get on a deep money thing today, but we just got to talk about this because it's real. So I can't afford to tithe. That was my mindset for the longest time. God, you see my bills? Like, you know how much I make, and you know how much I have to pay out. You see the spreadsheet. You see all these different things. And then I started to have a mindset change, and it was, I can't afford not to give. I can't afford not to tithe. It wasn't until I gave out of my poverty, and not that I was in poverty, because the Lord was still providing, and I still had a cushy place to live, so I wasn't living in a dump and had 2 nickels shoved together. But I gave out of my, out of my lack of bills, and then I saw the blessings and things start to happen in my life. Now, let's do a timeout, because this is not some prosperity gospel thing of you give to get and all these different things. That is absolutely 100% not what we are talking about. Okay? So dismiss that from your mind. What we were talking about is a heart change. There was a heart change in me, so I saw more of how God was blessing me. But then by submitting myself, I was allowing God to do more things. But we'll get to that. Let me read you a story. So a young pastor, I like to think I'm a young pastor. A young pastor came to a church that had been accustomed to raising its annual budget by means of suppers, bazaars, events, things like that. And he told the officers, we'll call them deacons, he told the deacons he could not agree with their program. Let's pray and ask God to meet every need, he suggested. At the end of the month, pay all the bills and leave my salary till the last. If there isn't enough money for my salary, then I'm the one who suffers and not the church. But I don't think anyone is going to suffer. And the deacons or the officers or the elders or whoever, whatever your word you want to plug in there, were sure that both the pastor and the church would die. They were sure of it. But that was not the case. Each month, every bill was paid. At the end of the year, there was surplus in the treasury for the first time in many, many years. So, let me get back into my life. So, I had a shift where I had to start tithing right off the top. The first thing I did when I got my money is I returned the tithe. And I want you guys to listen to the sentence I use, returned the tithe. I slip up every now and again, but I try to avoid give, because we don't give back to God. We return what we've already been given. I could do an entire message in that alone, but we returned the tithe. So I had to start returning the tithe right up top. That was the first bill I ever paid. It's the first thing I ever did, was to return the tithe. And man, it was scary. It was uncomfortable. The spreadsheet did not allow me to do those things. But God always makes it add up. It always worked out. Things always happened. It was uncomfortable at times. It was odd at times, but it always worked its way through. God always provided, because I allowed myself to be under his authority. I allowed him to be my provider. I rested in him as a child and was dependent on him. So we're going to read a fun story in Genesis. If you got a Bible and you want to follow along, Genesis 22, we're going to read through it. You're going to get to hear a fun story in my term and narrative a little bit, which is always interesting. But Genesis 22, and it's the story of Abraham being tested. This is just a good story. So, sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham, here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Okay, so first of all, what? Imagine you're talking to God, and God says, "I want you to take your firstborn and sacrifice him." Like, that might cause me to pause and have a deeper conversation with God, but not Abraham. Abraham is so in tune, he's like, in my head I'm thinking, he's like, "All right, God, this seems crazy, but let's go, you got it." So early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. he said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." So far, everything seems normal. Like, you guys stay here. Stay here. I'm gonna take Isaac. We're fine. I'm gonna take Isaac, and we're gonna go. You just sit tight. We'll be back. So Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" So now Isaac's suspect right now, right? He's kind of gone, Dad, we're missing something. We don't have the offering. Like, we didn't bring a lamb. We don't have anything to bring. We got the wood, we got the fire, we got the stuff. We don't have the thing to kill. So if I'm Isaac, I'm already getting a little worried, a little stressed out. Like, how is this going to work out? How is this whole thing going to end? 9. When they reached the place God had told them about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." So, again, what? Like, I wish I could be there to watch this go on. Like, was there a struggle? Did Isaac even fight back? Like, how does an old man bind up, tie up, and get on the altar his son? Like, I would love to see this narrative in real life play out, because when I did kids ministry and youth ministry, I used to say there are crazy stories in the Bible. This is one of those crazy stories. So, "Abraham, Abraham, here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place the Lord will provide, and to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." Verse 14 shows us one of the names of God. The Lord will provide. The story is so much drama and angst and worry and things going on. Like, sometimes we act like there's books out there that are better to read than this, and then we forget about these stories that are angst stories. They are gut-wrenching stories as we read through them. Like, what's going to happen? How is God going to show up? How is God going to do something cool? It's the last great test of Abraham's faith. Comparable to the original call to leave his home and his family. Although we are told it's the last great test, for Abraham, God's commandment was just totally real. It was just, God's telling me to go, I'll go. It was appalling, emotional, and theological. For Isaac, the promise of the blessing dependent on the fulfillment and all these different things that could happen if Isaac died. And he's torn between the love for his child and the obedience to God. So Abraham is facing this agonizing choice. I don't know. Well, I feel pretty confident I couldn't do it. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know that I could knowingly bring my kid. I don't know. I couldn't be Abraham and knowingly bring my son to a sacrifice. I'd be like, I trust you, God. I trust God a lot, but that just seems next level to me. But here's the thing. Step by step, faith and hope triumphed over fear and doubt. Step by step, it triumphed over fear and doubt until the knife was raised to kill Isaac. In this way, he showed he was willing to put God's call above every other commitment and emotional attachment, and test was over. Abraham said, I can do it. I got it. And a ram, as we read, was sacrificed in the place of Isaac, and the angel declared that Abraham's act of obedience changed the status of the promises. He tested Abraham for the purpose of obedience and trust, because Abraham was faithful to obey God even when he didn't understand. Abraham didn't know how the story was going to end. He just trusted God with all the steps in the middle. God was able to show himself as Jehovah Jireh, our provider. God provided for Abraham so that he didn't have to sacrifice his son. Often we don't get as far as Abraham did. The moment we are tested, the moment something comes against us, we begin to doubt, we begin to fold, we begin to crumble. We can't stand firm on God's promises. We don't stand firm that he will reveal himself and that he will provide for us. I've seen it many times in my life, in the life of others. When I stay committed to the call God has placed on my life and the things he is asking me to do, my needs are always met. Needs are always met. Again, not greeds, not those big, like, God, give me a big house. No, my needs are always met. And rarely has it been comfortable. There's been some times where I get a little nervous and I start sweating and freaking out a little bit, but my needs have always been met. Abraham was faithful with the small stuff, so when God asked for what I would call the crazy, he didn't even flinch. If we read the story, there's no doubt. There's no second guess. God says it, and he does it. And then when it's time, he's like, all right, God, you're going to show up or do something. I can remember to this day when I started in ministry, I started internships and volunteering. And when I started doing all these things, I was like, oh man, like this is going to be awesome. I'm going to lead groups. I'm going to preach. I'm going to do all these different things. I'm going to train people. Like I'm going to be awesome. And you guys know what I started with? Stacking chairs. That was my job for the longest time, was stacking and unstacking and restacking and unstacking and setting up rooms and putting rooms away, and every week doing this over and over and over again. And I finally got to the point where like I would start praying over these chairs as I would set them up. And I would start saying, God, if this is how I reach kids, then this is how I reach kids. If this is what you have for me, this is what I will do. If I have reached my apex, then all right, let's roll with it. Being faithful in the small things builds your connection and trust with God, so you know when he's asking you to be faithful in the big things. If we're not doing the small, if we're not trusting with the small, if we're not being faithful in the small, the big doesn't happen. The big doesn't come. Starting with the small things allows me not to doubt the big things. Like when I left I like to say that they paid me a silly lot of money when I was in the corporate world, a lot of money. And I trusted God to leave that knowing he would provide when I went back into ministry to be a kids and men's pastor. And that was, you can talk to Jasmine sometimes, it was uncomfortable, but we knew God was doing something. We knew God was providing. We knew God was showing up. The spreadsheet didn't add up as far as paying our bills, but then all of a sudden a job showed up for Jasmine. And our needs just barely happened. And then guess what? A few months later, she got a better job. And God continued to provide. Or when I decided to apply for a job that I never knew I wanted in the first place, and decided to interview at the tail end of a pandemic, and moved to a community with no housing and in an economy where things are so crazy expensive it's not even funny. But you know what? God has already provided and will continue to provide every single day. But here it is. I didn't do any of this, okay? This wasn't me. All I've ever done is trusted God with the small things he's given me in life and watched him grow and do things. God is my provider, and when he says go, I will always listen, because it is better to be in his will and plan and be uncomfortable than it is to be on my own. It just is. I will pick uncomfortable in God every single day of the week than I will wanting to ever try this thing on my own. And I only got there by starting with one small thing at a time. For me, it was money. For you, it might be something else. But for me, it was the tithe. If I would have never gotten the tithe right in my life, I guarantee you I would have never seen God do things, because I wasn't trusting him with that area. By holding back that tithe or tithing if I could afford it at the end, I was holding back a part of me. I was holding back a part of my relationship and my connection with God. And like I said, for you, it's something else. For you, money might not be a thing. James 4, 1-3 says, "What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and you wage war to take it away from them, yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all in the wrong place. You want only what will give you pleasure." Verse 3 is critical in separating God, our provider, from a magic genie in a bottle. Okay? God is not a magic genie. We don't rub a lamp and get 3 wishes and say, "Big house, cool car, great job." Doesn't work that way. And that verse is that key separator. Even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want only what will give you pleasure. Only when we ask with the right motives do we receive what we ask for from God. James points out that all of the problems we experience come from an unfulfilled desire. Whether you desire security, peace, material things, if we're not careful, our desires can ultimately lead us to a lack of trust in God when our desires are set first. However, when we ask God for what we need, or we live like children in that dependence, he pours out his provision on us. Again, not prosperity, but he meets our needs. Instead of trying to solve your own problems and provide for yourself, call on the provider. Call his name, Jehovah Jireh. You are my provider. Let God be your provider. I don't know how many more stories we need in this book to stand in complete dependence and faith on God that he will provide for all of our needs. We have to ask. We have to ask with the right motives. So think about where you're at today. Think about your life right now this morning. Are you trying to do it all on your own? Trying to do it by yourself? And if and when it falls apart, then you cry out, then you beg, then you plead, "God, provide. Please show up. I need you so desperately." Are you really looking at your life and submitting all of the areas over to God? Again, mine was money. Mine was the tithe, 100%. But each and every one of us, I will guarantee, has an area of our life that is holding us back from living in that full fulfillment and that full relational connection with God. Are we being a child completely dependent on him first? So where do you need to start? Again, this is all a process. Our walk is all a process. None of us are perfect. None of us will ever be perfect. This is a church of imperfect people. We are all in a process. So where do you need to start your process? What are the areas that are preventing you from living in that fullness of God? What areas of your life do you need to submit to God so he can fully provide for your needs? We got to look at our lives and remove the roadblocks. Remember, there will be discomfort at times. It will be scary and it will be unnerving. You won't have all the answers. Abraham didn't have all the answers. He didn't know how the story was going to end. But God does. And if we live to follow and honor and serve, I can't think of a better reward than what we get in the end of heaven. But for others, you've got this thing figured out. You are fully submitted. You are living in a life that is humming, and God has provided for you. So the question for you today is, how are you coming alongside the rest of us? How are you helping and partnering with us that don't know, learn? How are we living in your faith and your stories and your commitment? I said the first Sunday I was here, this takes a team effort. And some of you have deeply rooted faith and phenomenal stories of when God has showed up. Some of us, when we're starting this journey, we need you, we need your connection, we need those stories. We need you to look at us and say, God will show up. I talked to a friend just this week that was working through some things of their own, and it was amazing how God's timing works out, where I was able to speak and say, okay, look at what I've gone through over the last couple years. All the times God has showed up. God will show up. God is going to provide. Just stay faithful to the call God has given you. So today, let's first and foremost ask for forgiveness for how we've tried to solve things and problems and life on our own. Let's choose to surrender to God and ask Him for His provision. Not our provision, not our list of wants and needs and cool things, but of His provision. And let's remember that provision is not just something He does. This is not just something God does. This is who God is. God is our provider. He is our shepherd. He is our eternal, always has been, always will be. So we sang a song this morning, and it just has good lyrics. So the first one of the lines was, "I'll never be more loved than I am right now." And like I said this morning, some of you just need to hear that. God loves you. You are His child. No matter what you've done, no matter what you will do, no matter how messed up you think you are, God loves you and cares for you no matter what. It doesn't take a trophy to make Him proud. Thank goodness, because I don't have any trophies. Going through a storm, but I won't go down. I hear your voice carried in the wings that pull me out. You would cross an ocean so I won't drown. Like, that one to me is huge. God is so big, so powerful, all providing, that He will cross an ocean to keep me from drowning. No matter what my life circumstances is, if I am resting and living in that dependence, God will cross that ocean. I will be, and here's the key, content in every circumstance. We don't have to worry. We don't have to fear. We don't have to do it because God has got it. Live in that. Rest in that every circumstance that God is going to provide. God is going to show up. Again, it might be uncomfortable, but God will do His thing, and just let Him do His thing. So today, as Clayton's coming to the piano to finish us with a song, let's be content in God. Let's be content in and through every circumstance, letting Him control it and Him be in charge of it. Both things personally and things of the church. There will be things as a church when we go through that will probably be uncomfortable. Let's live in God that He will provide in every circumstance. So think about that as Clayton closes us here in a song, and I'll be back in just a second to pray.
Would you go ahead and stand with me this morning? We're going to just close with the chorus at the cross.